Hi, Karl de Leeuw here. Why we must stop buying Chinese products. Did you know that according to SaveTibet.org, 157 Buddhist Tibetans died during their protest since 2009 because of the Chinese government's punitive rules? So why are they doing this? The answer lies in that to become a Chinese Communist Party member, you need to be an atheist. To be an atheist is fine because the Creator gave us free will, which is one of the most amazing gifts we have that up to now we are mainly squandering. But if the Chinese Communist Party let its people practice whatever religion they wanted and not to be persecuted, then this would clearly not happen. It is because of the Chinese Communist Party's persecution that I'm calling on you to stop buying Chinese products and go further by calling on the UK government to be the first in the world to stop buying Chinese products. So why have economic sanctions by way of not purchasing Chinese products? Because it works. I grew up in apartheid South Africa in the 1960s and 70s where sanctions worked. I had to be in the military for 2 years and during that time was an electronic warfare operator in the South African Navy and listened to Morse code messages of our enemy on the Namibia-Angola border. What transpired is that I got first-hand information that the South African Air Force could not compete with the Russian MiG aircraft fighters, and if you lost air superiority, that was the end. This, in my view, is one of the main reasons for the South African apartheid government backing down and why Mandela was released. So I believe sanctions worked, but it took 10 years or more. The black South African community also had to struggle short-term, but the medium to long-term advantages outweighed the sanctions. This documentary is not aimed at the Chinese people at all. In fact, it is to assist the Chinese people to become free-willed and earn their own way, as we will discuss later. In South Africa, you had to overthrow apartheid, and in China, you have to cripple the Chinese economy. Imagine what would happen if just 5% of the world stopped buying Chinese products. It will have a ripple effect like never seen before because it will affect confidence and all investment in China will halt. Don't underestimate the power of the butterfly effect. Let's return to Tibet and the Buddhist monks and nuns. Tibet is in the southwestern corner of China. Just under 20% of the Chinese population are Buddhists. So this makes the Chinese persecution of Buddhists in China the number one issue. Most of the Buddhist population in China reside in Tibet, but there are other Buddhists in other locations too. In the early 1950s, China illegally invaded Tibet. A draft resolution was tabled at the General Assembly of the United Nations and was called Invasion of Tibet by Foreign Forces. But this resolution was deferred by the UN on the pretext that the status of Tibet was not clear. This was just after the end of the Second World War. In today's world, if another country invaded another illegally, as a minimum, you will have economic sanctions on that country. The current 14th Dalai Lama had to flee Tibet in 1959, shortly after the illegal Chinese invasion, and now lives in Dharamshala in India. This is unacceptable. So what is happening today in China with Buddhists? On the 1st of May 2021, 52 new administrative rules took place in China, specifying that religious leaders must actively support the Chinese Communist Party practices, leadership, and core values. These rules state that a database will record religious personnel by name and assess compliance. So every Chinese person has a social credit score. Very little can be found online about current Buddhists being persecuted, but I want to ask 3 questions. First, according to SaveTibet.org, since 2009, 157 Buddhist Tibetans died following them protesting. Why? Second, why has the 14th Dalai Lama not returned to Tibet? Third, why has China not given Tibet back since it was illegally invaded? So let's have a few seconds of quiet contemplation now for the Buddhists living in China, and how every time you buy a Chinese product, you are helping the Chinese Communist Party persecute Buddhists. Let's now turn to the second most persecuted religion in China by size of population, the Christians. Roughly 4% of the Chinese population are Christians. Christians in China reside in most Chinese provinces, and the darker the area in this map, the higher percentage of the Christians reside in that province. In 2018, the Chinese Communist Party issued directives to houses of worship. These including barring minors from churches and from exposure to religion. Bibles became harder to find and began being censored on the internet and on app stores. As mentioned before, on the 1st of May 2021, 52 new administrative rules took place in China, specifying that religious leaders must actively support the Chinese Communist Party practices, leadership, and core values, even in sermons. Again, as in other religions, these rules state that a database will record church personnel by name and access compliance. Every Chinese person has a social credit score. According to the National Review, the results have been the closure of thousands of churches and the detainment of hundreds of thousands of Christian leaders. Some even talk of torture and the Christian leaders disappearing. So let's have a few seconds of quiet contemplation now for the Christians living in China. And now every time you buy a Chinese product, you are helping the Chinese Communist Party persecute the Christians. Turning now to the Muslims in China that make up 2 to 3% of the Chinese population. The Muslims are mainly situated in the Xinjiang province in the northwestern corner of China. However, there are Muslims in other provinces as well. The Uyghur Muslims in the Xinjiang province currently have more press exposure. Again, Muslims are under the same Chinese Communist Party rules that were brought in during 2018. Let's quickly summarize what persecution is going on by the Chinese Communist Party. In 2018, the Chinese Communist Party was vigorously pursuing the suppression of mosques. Growing of beards and wearing veils by Uyghurs were banned. All vehicle owners were required to install GPS tracking devices. Uyghur families were required to allow Chinese Communist Party officials to live in their homes as relatives to make sure they did not pray and wear religious clothing. Still, in 2018, it was reported that the Muslim Uyghurs were being detained in massive internment camps. The United Nations on the 31st of August 2018 called on the Chinese government to end the practice of detention without lawful charge, trial, and conviction of an estimated 1 to 2 million Muslims. So let's have a few seconds of quiet contemplation now for the Muslims living in China, and how every time you buy a Chinese product, you are helping the Chinese Communist Party persecute Muslims. Now for more shocking news. Did you know that China is the biggest copycat in the world? Yes, all they do is copy the rest of the world's inventions and then sell them on. According to the 2018 Global Brand Counterfeiting Report, 80% of the world's counterfeits originate in China. But it gets worse. In China, they copy Western countries' products to a T. Kabbalah.com, via the Zohar, provides the secrets of the Old Testament and confirms that earning is everything. So if a population doesn't earn their own way, this is really bad for them. Therefore, economic sanctions through not purchasing Chinese goods and counterfeits is for the best for Chinese people. Just imagine if we unleash the 1.4 billion members of the Chinese population to invent things rather than copy things, how this could make the world a better place. Now for the worst of all, yin yang. Scientists know that for every negative there is a positive. This is yin yang, and coined by the Chinese themselves. We can have world peace, as we will discuss later. If we want world peace, then it's like a scale. If the Chinese keep on doing what they're doing, then the scale is tipped the wrong way. We need the scales of good and bad to neutralize, and at that point we can have world peace. So the reason why I say the current state of the Chinese Communist Party is the worst of all is that unless they change, we simply cannot have world peace. That is a travesty, and even more of a reason for economic sanctions. I mentioned world peace. Yes, we can have world peace in our lifetime via the truth. 80% of humanity is made up of the 5 main religions, being Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity and Islam. Science has proven evolution that is set out in Genesis in the Old Testament Bible. If you believe in evolution, then there can only be one creator for all of humanity. So once we get this truth out there, the 5 main religions will relax, and this will be the start of world peace. So what can you do today to start world peace and help the persecuted Buddhists, Christians and Muslims in China? Stop buying Chinese products and counterfeits. Let's look at just 2 products. There are many non-Chinese mobile phones. With computers, even if you buy a non-Chinese made computer, some part of the computer will most probably come from China. So why not produce a computer that is 100% non-Chinese? I recently looked at non-Chinese computers, and the best value for money are Apple, Mac and HP, then Dell. I paid double the price for my computer, and as I am doing this voiceover, I feel proud not to help the persecution of Buddhists, Christians and Muslims in China. What can governments do? I call call on the UK government to be the first government to ban all products made in China. The UK, via the 54 Commonwealth countries that make up 1/4 of humanity by population, has a lot of influence. Such a step by the UK would be the biggest humanitarian act ever undertaken, because roughly 1/4 of the Chinese population is being persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party. That is roughly 350 million people, and more people than everyone in the United States. Yes, the same amount of people are persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party as the complete population in the US.